is Apple's horrifying TV show packed with hidden satanic meanings. This is part 2 of our video about the new show Severance. Just a heads up, there are spoilers in this video regarding season 2. If you don't want to see those, go back and watch part 1 of this video. The TV show Severance has a very interesting premise. What if you can go into work and not remember what was happening with your workday? Then you would come out and just focus on your regular day-to-day life. You could actually compartmentalize your work life from your home life. Doesn't sound like such a bad idea, does it? Well, when actually walked out to its logical conclusion, it's horrifying. Season 1 takes us deep into this exact experience through a procedure called severance, where there's a chip inserted into your brain and you develop a different consciousness while you're at work. This would be called your innie, and your outie is the person that exists outside of work. And this is pretty much the same person with 2 different consciousness, working for this sketchy company that's very cult-like called Lumen Industries that has a deity-like figure named Kier at its head and has been passed down through multiple generations. In season 2, we start finding out exactly what problems Lumen is trying to solve and how the employees at Severance are all a part of this. Now, in our first video, we talked about the psychology around human nature and how it directly ties into scripture, specifically the passage in James chapter 1 that says a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways, ultimately illustrating how this was the objective of the severance procedure, to separate someone, to make them 2 different people. This is not good. But as I got deeper and deeper into season 2, it went beyond just humans' desire to compartmentalize and avoid discomfort. It seemed to dive directly into satanic symbols. And the organization at the helm of all this isn't just some kooky, dystopian sci-fi company in the show. What they're attempting to solve for is actually a lot more common and a lot more darker than many of us would expect. But before we get into that, guys, my name is Ruslan. This channel exists to encourage, empower, and inspire you to live a life that blesses God. Sometimes that means us engaging with things like archaeology and ancient history. Other times that looks like us engaging in modern TV shows and media to get a better perspective of how it is congruent or at times incongruent with a biblical worldview. So if you're new here, or if you're not new here, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, as a huge percentage of the people that watch this channel are still not subscribed. Let's get back to the video. Now, before we get into some of the meaning around season 2, Tim Cook of Apple, who unironically made a trailer of him going into the Severance set to promote it a while back, just announced that Apple TV is doing a season 3. That's right. So this show has been renewed for season 3. And of course, Tim Cook unironically posting this video, and I say unironically because a lot of Apple employees parallel working at Lumen to working at Apple. So this is the little tweet: season 3 of Severance is available upon request. Tim Cook. The fact that he doesn't get how this looks is hilarious to me. Well, let me recap season 2. I can't cover it all, we'd be here all day, but I want to get into some of the meaning and some of the deeper story here. So basically what happens is Mark discovers that his wife, who he thought was dead, his outie, is actually alive. And so his innie and his outie discover that his wife is alive, and not only is she alive, she's actually within the Severance community. But they're running some sort of weird experiment on her. Not only does she have an innie and an outie, she actually has multiple severed consciousnesses, meaning that not only is she just an innie and an outie, that there's multiple innies and outies, and we don't quite understand what's happening. She's going to these different rooms, she's going to the dentist, she's on a simulation of a flight that's crashing. It's really weird stuff. And so remember, Mark thinks that she's dead. Mark thinks that she's gone. So she's in Lumen Industries on a floor they don't have access to, and she's completely detached from the outer world. So Mark discovers she's alive and comes up with a plan to try and rescue her out. So now this is beyond just the utilitarian perspective of Lumen's severance procedure. Now they're full on experimenting on humans that are thought to be dead. This gets into the territory of kidnapping, trafficking, all kinds of crazy stuff, which, if you've been keeping up with the Diddy and the CEO of Abercrombie & Fitch, you know that this is a little too close to home. Now in season 2, we start to discover why Lumen is doing this. And on its surface, it actually seems like a benevolent reason. Okay, here is the biggest spoiler of all of this. Lumen is trying to create severed consciousnesses in times where humans are experiencing pain and suffering. They're trying to alleviate pain and suffering. There's a callback to this in season 1 where Devin, Mark's outie sister, goes to give birth at some birthing center and discovers a woman who she's talking to, and she kind of seems out of it, and then later she sees her at a park and the woman acts like she has no idea who Devin is. And later on, we discover this birthing center is a part of the lumen severance experience. People who don't want to remember the pains of childbirth, they will go there to have their memories severed from it. And this is exactly where outie Mark ends up with Miss Cobell and his sister Devin, which then leads to a bizarre sequence of Mark's innie and outie having hours and hours of back and forth arguing over the plan to rescue his wife, Gemma. How do they do this? Well, over a old school camera recorder. Innie Mark goes inside this cabin birthing center, records a video on a camcorder, and then goes outside where outie Mark then watches the video and sends him a video back. It's one of the craziest scenes I've ever experienced in any TV show. And so he's basically arguing with himself about how to save his outie wife, Gemma. But some tension is raised. Innie Mark discovers that if they actually rescue Gemma, who has been thought to be dead, and they bring her out, that outie Mark will have no more motivation to deal with Lumen. He will probably stop working there and expose the entire company for the evil things that they're doing. Innie Mark does not want him to do that. Why? Because Innie Mark has fallen in love with a coworker. The work-wife situation, but kind of an affair, like it's complicated. Side note, Mark's Innie relationship is actually with Helly. She is the daughter of the CEO of the company. She's a direct descendant of Kier. She just doesn't know it when she's at work. Well, until the end of season 1. But that's neither here nor there. So as he's having this back and forth with his innie and his outie, they're arguing, Mark introduces the idea of reintegration, which he's been going through. And reintegration is supposed to bring the innie and the outie's consciousness into one person. He pitches this to his innie, who's not buying it. His innie thinks, hey, if I help you get Gemma back, you'll just expose Lumen. Lumen will cease to exist. I will cease to exist. So outie Mark goes back to work, and innie Mark is actually persuaded by his work girlfriend, Helly, to go through with the plan of rescuing Gemma. And that's what brings us to the satanic goats. So in season 1, they discover this weird room where there is a dude nursing a little baby goat. They then discover that this is a whole nother wing within Lumen Industries, meaning that there's a whole team of people that appear to be farmers, and they're working with these goats. Innie Mark kinda hits it off with them, though they almost get murked, but they don't, and they're kind of cordial. It's a weird dynamic. All these different groups in the severed floor are kind of pinned against each other. So in the season 2 finale, there's about to be this weird sacrificial moment. Lorne is there with Drummond in a secret room, and they are about to do this sacrifice. And Innie Mark ends up stumbling across this floor that's beneath them where Gemma is. And they have this encounter. Now, I want to give a big shout out to the channel. Think Story is actually who pointed out all of the imagery here. So we're going to look at his video. But if you're interested in the deeper meaning behind some of this stuff around Severance, check out their channel.
So, okay, real quick. Why is a goat sacrifice happening?
So we don't know, but we're about to find out through Think Story. He's going to give us his interpretation of it and connect it to Satanism. Check this out.
Since season 1, one of the biggest questions on everyone's minds are what the hell are these friggin' goats? And the finale gives us a bit more clues about these kids. Yeah, I didn't know that a baby goat is called a kid. It makes more sense now that the mascot for Cobell's school were the fighting kids. And now that we know these animals are used as a sacrifice, it adds an extra layer of creepy. The first thing we'll learn is that the Severance floor hallway has a hidden room. It makes me question whether there are other such rooms scattered around the labyrinthine halls. As Gemma is herded to Cold Harbor, Lorne, the head of Mammalian's Nurturable, brings a goat to Drummond. The name Lorne originates in Scotland and means fox, and foxes are known to go after goats, especially kids. So this is all very planned out by the writer.
I mean, the amount of detail on the writing here is insane.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And remember, Lorne is from a different department. All these departments are pinned up to hate each other and to be afraid of each other. And her and Mark hit it off earlier, and that's why when Mark is in this predicament, she kind of comes to his rescue.
It's also crazy to have the death of a kid juxtaposed to Gemma literally dismantling the crib of her dead child.
The dismantling of the kid of her dead child is the final test in the experiment on Gemma to see if she can actually be fully severed from the most traumatic experience anyone has ever suffered, which would be the death of her child. They lost a baby, and so she's back, and they asked her to disassemble the crib of her baby. So what is the worst thing that could happen? Losing a kid. They're testing on Gemma to alleviate pain and suffering to see if she could actually go through with the process of disassembling without remembering the loss that she had. And we may do a part 3 on Severance's pro-life undertones.
Has come as a, quote, offering, and this particular kid was chosen because it's demonstrated Lumen's 9 core principles such as verve and wiles. The whole ceremony is akin to a cultish or satanic ritual. Goats have commonly been associated with the devil, and even Lauren's outfit looks satanic in its lumen black.
So I would just like the record show that we as Christian creators didn't say it first.
Yes.
Okay, I don't know where Think Story is within his faith and his worldview, but this is this channel that is openly saying these things are satanic. And so he's pointing out that our outfit looks satanic. So he's actually the one drawing this parallel. And a lot of people in our first video also pointed out that there's some weird satanic imagery in this show.
Panic in its lumen black. This is a ritual that's been done multiple times before, as Lauren will question how many times they'll have to keep doing this. You can see that Lauren does not like this senseless killing, and it's no doubt part of the reason she'll turn on Drummond. But the very fact that this has been done multiple times raises many questions. How many times has Gemma gone through this process? Are there others like Gemma who are also going through this efficacy test? Remember, there is an identical room across from her on the test floor. This goat, referred to as a beast by Drummond, will be attuned to a, quote, cherished woman, who we can assume is Gemma. Its spirit will guide her to Kier's door. I personally believe that this whole ritual should be taken symbolically and not literally. Like, I don't believe a ghost goat is going to lead Gemma to a door where Kier is.
He's saying it's symbolic, not to be taken literally. I don't think it really matters. I think when people are doing satanic rituals, I don't care what they mean or intend or how they view it. The fact that there's a satanic ritual happening.
So from a narrative standpoint, weird, interesting, I think it's showing that Lumen is like more culty than corporate, right?
Yeah, more culty, but not just culty, demonic.
100%. What is your view as a consumer? Does it change your relationship with a narrative that is using satanic imagery while watching, or do you like let into the story of it?
In this story, Lumen is not propped up as a beacon of light that is good. Lumen is clearly bad.
Yeah.
What they're doing is bad. How they're treating their innies is bad. This entire thing is not glorified. So it's not as if we're watching a show and this idea of eliminating suffering by any means necessary, including, you know, developing these separate consciousness. This isn't glorified. This is clearly depicted as evil. Everyone who's a part of this and behind this, from the Kier to the family to this entire side of the folks who are on the Lumen industry side, is depicted as evil. So I think of the passage that says, woe to those who call evil good and good evil. So I actually think in this show, they're properly calling evil evil. I don't think this is a backwards thing. Sometimes we'll see Satanism glorified in other media.
So they're showing satanic imagery in the proper context for the sake of a story, in which would be similar to the telling of any evil versus good story.
Correct.
Some cultures, goats were used in ritual sacrifices to symbolize the release of its life force or spirit to a higher power. In this case, that higher power would be Kier. The ritual would act as a bridge between the human consciousness and the divine, with the goat being a vessel or medium connecting the two. So it's possible this is all part of some attempt to get closer to Kier. We'll also see several depictions of this ritual where someone offers up the goat to be sacrificed. I interpreted this one as the goat resurrected, with the sun blaring behind it like those old Christian paintings, suggesting something divine.
Well,
Jesus being the lamb, but they're perverting it to the goat being resurrected to usher in Gemma into the spirit realm.
Yeah.
To be with Kier being a false god.
Whoa.
The death altar is also in the shape of a swaddled baby, with just enough room for the head to poke out where it will be killed using a bolt pistol. The sides also seem to have writing on them, however the quality isn't good enough to make out what it says.
So pretty interesting stuff about the goats. What happens? Well, Drummond ends up attacking Mark and almost beating him to death. Lauren ends up using that pistol that they were going to use to sacrifice the goat to help Mark get out of that situation. She ends up beating Drummond, and then Mark gets that pistol, holds Drummond hostage with that pistol to the floor where Gemma's at, the lower floor, and then his innie transitions into his outie, because remember, his innie is only on the severed floor, and then in the process of transitioning, he actually accidentally kills Drummond. He's holding him hostage, lets off the shot, ends up killing him, and then is smothered in blood, which is the image that you guys see on the thumbnail of this video. Long story short, outie Mark finds Gemma, gets her out. They reunite. She can't believe it. This is no longer a different severed version of her. This is the Gemma from the outside world. They go back to the severed floor to find the emergency exit. Now S.D.N.Y is back. And so S.D.N.Y understands what's going on because that was the plan. And he's like, okay, I guess we're going through with this. He then is trying to get Gemma and himself to the exit. And as he gets there, the lights are going off. The entire building looks like it's about to be under lockdown. And he gets Gemma to the door. But then at the very last minute, S.D.N.Y does not go through with it. He thinks about his love inside. Heli is who encouraged him to do all of this, but Heli and him having a relationship is only possible within the severed floor. So in Mark's S.D.N.Y's desire to be outside of the severed floor, to no longer be a slave to Lumen Industries, he decides to change his mind. Gemma goes out, he stays in. She's begging for him to go out with her. He chooses not to because this would cease not just his existence as an S.D.N.Y, but also cease his potential for love with Heli. The show ends with him running with Heli down a hallway, probably without a lot of time left, but with a desire to spend the remainder of their time together. And this is my takeaway. S.D.N.Y promises S.D.N.Y the ability to reintegrate and fuse their consciousnesses. S.D.N.Y, who for the majority of the show is portrayed as the virtuous one, all of a sudden kind of has a role reversal of sorts. He doesn't believe his outie. He feels like reintegration is not possible, and he chooses to stay inside of the severed floor. He chooses to stay a slave to Lumen Industries for the bit of time he has remaining. So in the same way, a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways, and most of us should desire to be who God created us to be, a fully integrated person who isn't compartmentalized from their pain, from their suffering, from the things that they're uncomfortable with. It's the same way that many of us claim we no longer want to be dysfunctional. Many of us claim that we don't want to compartmentalize. We don't want to be hypocrites. We want to be a fully integrated person. I would say and argue that the process of being a fully integrated person is what we would call in Christianity the process of sanctification. We're dead in our trespasses, and Jesus comes through his sacrifice on the cross, allowing us to be reconciled to the Father and to be born again and a fully whole integrated person. We may have some of the sinful tendencies and dysfunctions, but we're born again with new desire and a new heart to serve God on this side of eternity. Yet when given the opportunity, our flesh chooses to remain disintegrated. In part 1 of this video, I talked about how the root word for integrity is integer, meaning one, meaning any person who's a person of integrity is ultimately the same person. They're a consistent person. They're not incongruent. They don't code switch and behave differently with their church friends versus their real friends versus their family versus their employees. They're the same. I understand some of us might talk different with the boys than we're talking with our kids. I get that. But I'm talking about, who are you in your truest essence? Are you congruent? Are you consistent? And what season 2 to me shows is that not only do people not truly want to be reintegrated into their whole self, but when given the option to find freedom, many people would rather go right back in to the thing that's been holding them captive, Lumen Industries. And Lumen Industries flat out is a demonic company. Why? Outside of their desire to have no more suffering and alleviate that through these weird severance procedures, they're ultimately trying to reduce the human experience to just the good things. And how could anyone truly experience pleasure and the joys of life without having something to counter it, without having something to anchor us? See, that's why I find the story of Jesus so compelling. Instead of him trying to flee from suffering, instead of him trying to avoid discomfort, he leans right into it. In the Garden of Gethsemane, he prays to God, Lord, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me, but not my will be done, your will be done. And Jesus is willing to step in and experience the full weight of suffering so that we can be reconciled back to the Father, so that we can be reintegrated, so that we could be whole and no longer compartmentalize the areas we're uncomfortable with, keeping certain secrets in our lives that we're ashamed of, but to step out into the light, confess our sins, and to be born again and walk in the wholeness of who God designed us to be. I find it so interesting that when we actually understand what Lumen is trying to do, they're trying to alleviate human suffering. Yet Jesus tells us in John 16:33 that I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. So isn't it interesting that Much of what's going on in the world is trying to eliminate suffering, and Jesus tells us you will suffer. And I think that suffering isn't always bad. I think suffering is actually how we grow and mature. And I love that Jesus is a God that walks through the suffering instead of humans who try and avoid suffering. But if you don't want to be stuck consistently returning back to your disintegrated dysfunction the way S.D.N.Y does at the end of season 2, watch this video. It's all about how they've been brainwashing us and how you can break out of it. All right, I'll see you over there. Peace.